Audio recording has begun. Focus lock. Hi everyone. Today we've got another discussion video. I know it's been a while since we've done one of these, but in this one I just wanted to talk about university and whether it's worth your time. Believe it or not, this is actually a question that's popped up quite frequently because I think for a lot of us Blender YouTubers, a significant portion of our audience is more on the younger side. So I'd say anywhere between 13 to 25 years old. And obviously a lot of these people are probably at pivotal points in their life where they need to make a decision for what they want to do next. So university comes up quite a lot. And I imagine there's lots of people that have pressure from their institutes or their parents bearing down on them to make very snappy decisions for their future. The problem is, and there's no sugarcoating it, I think it's very difficult to know exactly what you want from life, especially in this day and age where everything's changing so quickly, technology is advancing at such a rapid pace. And I think a lot of people suffer from the FOMO, so the fear of missing out element of thinking, well, if I go down this path and try this thing out for a few years, then maybe I'll figure out that I don't like it, and then that's wasted time when there's this other perfectly viable thing that I could have tried. So there's like all these different pathways, and I think it's extremely difficult to try and pick one and stick to it. University is such a difficult decision to make because it kind of requires that you pick a path that you might not know a lot about, that you're just choosing on a whim and then committing to it for like a few years on end. And in a lot of cases, it might even be a massive financial investment depending on where you're based. So when people come to me asking, should I go to university for 3D art? I'm like, that's a bit of a loaded question. If you're relying on someone else to make that decision for you, you're kind of unloading your entire future onto them to make a choice for you. So I can never answer any of those questions to a degree that will make me feel comfortable. I don't want to be reliable for messing up anyone's futures just by saying yes or no to like a YouTube comment. So I thought, okay, today let's just unload some thoughts. So I'll have a video link that I can just give to people if they want to ask that question in the future. And maybe this will help some people, maybe it'll be useless, but we'll see. So first of all, making contacts. So when people weigh up the pros and cons about going to university, one of the main things they bring up is networking. So in university, they say you will get to meet a lot of interesting people, a lot of people in the industry, people that you can make contacts with and you can maybe leverage to get you to places. So let's talk about the viability for that. Are the contacts you make in university actually going to help you in your future? Now, everything I say in this is going to be a bit of a generalization. Nothing applies to absolutely every university or every country or every culture. So please take everything with a pinch of salt because it's going to be a very grayscale subject. It really depends whether the contacts you meet in university will be able to help you. In a lot of cases, universities will have agreements with different companies for work placements and apprenticeships, which they can put their students on for a certain year or a specified amount of time. That will be useful because you have something extra for your CV, and you may also make more contacts in those placements that may be more useful and more specific to the kind of work you want to do when compared to the university in general. Secondly to that, professors teaching in universities may have come from places of experience within the industry, so they may also know people and be able to provide you with some extra pieces of information that may be more useful than just like a general all-encompassing course taught by someone that wasn't really in that field. So those are the general positives that are brought up, but I'm about to give you the kind of realistic take on that I don't think a lot of people tend to talk about. If you're going to university and you have a professor that was working in a field, you need to ask yourself, why are they not working in that field now? Because generally, if we're taking the example of games development, it's probably better paid work than working as a professor for a university. Again, highly subjective, depends on a lot of factors. There is a stigma that the kind of people that go and teach in universities are the ones that were not good enough to succeed in the field, so they ended up failing, and their only backup plan is to teach people instead. Massive, huge generalization warning there, because of course there are going to be people that did work in the industry, but then they just figured out for themselves that they enjoyed teaching people more, and that's perfectly viable. But I just think that factor is worth keeping in mind, especially if you're going to a lesser known university that kind of has a disproportionate promise of experience from the industry coming to a particularly not well-known uni. You've got to think, well, there's a bit of a discrepancy there. What's going on? If someone has spent decades working in the industry, do you really think that they're going to go to some small, lesser-known, extremely low-paying university to do work? No, they're probably going to find the better places, the more well-known places to go. So kind of just measure up like the reputation of the place you're going to and the cost level, and compare that with the experience of the professors that they're kind of promising. It's just something to keep in mind, and I probably shouldn't go too much deeper into that because that's probably a bit of a controversial one to talk about. Let's just say we'll call it the Stockholm syndrome of education. People come out of school, they choose a field that they want to go into, they spend years learning it. Unfortunately, they just run out of luck, they don't get enough experience, they just can't get into the field, maybe years advance quite a bit, so they fall back into the education system and start teaching it instead. It's like a kind of cycle. You end up loving the system that you wanted to get out of in the first place. Now, a second argument against the idea that the contacts you make in university will be valuable is that social media exists. So it may sound stupid, but you can reach more industry professionals on Twitter in like 10 minutes than you can do going through like a 3-year university course. In fact, a lot of the other Blender creators that I've been spending time with over the last couple of years have received job offers from industry professionals through Twitter. Now, I understand that might sound stupid, especially if there's any parents watching or people that aren't particularly versed in the ways of social media, but that's the way the world is changing. You can reach industry professionals, world leaders, and CEOs through Twitter. You don't need to go through any of these official institutes like universities and spend thousands of dollars or pounds or whatever your currency. All you need is an email address and an account. And if you have it, a good portfolio online, and then you can just get it in front of people. But okay, lots of caveats here. If you want to make use of contacts online instead of going through the context of university, then you need to kind of present yourself differently. Now, this is a major point that I think people will tend to skip over when they talk to people with particularly large followings. With university, when it comes to talking to professionals, you have the context of university already pre-established. If you're talking to a professional, they know you're a student, they know you're dedicated, they know that you probably have a certain personality about you that's a bit more respectful, again, massive caveats, but the context has been established. The university acts as a filter which removes like 90% of people. So you know that the extra 10% that's there, or maybe even less, depending again, that professional will know, okay, this person's probably worth speaking to. There's probably an extra sense of value to them. However, when it comes to online and social media, there is no filter. There is no pre-established context about the sense of value that a person might have who's trying to communicate with you. So if you're going to try and make use of online contacts, you really do need to present yourself in a different way. Now, you can do that, via message, just try and break down everything that you're about, everything that you want. You want to find experience, you want information, you want knowledge, you want mentorship. Okay, that's fine. But you've got to understand that you've got to invest more time into establishing that context, and it's probably going to take more than just a single message. So you've also got to have the element of luck that someone that you're trying to communicate with is actually prepared and ready to engage with what you're trying to present. Now, from what I've seen, just simple messages alone aren't really good enough to do that. If you're going to go through the alternative route, if you want to call it that, of not going to uni and making your own way through life, learning everything by yourself and using contacts that you found online, then I recommend having a following. And the reason I say that is because even though this might not be the way we want it to be from a moral or an ethical standpoint, having a large following significantly helps with your presentation when communicating with other people. Imagine this, you've come out of school, maybe we'll say for the sake of argument, you're 18 years old. You've got a pretty nice portfolio, you've spent some years working on artwork, you've become pretty good at it, you've made something beautiful on ArtStation, you've focused on quality over quantity, you've got something you're ready to present. Now, ideally, you'd think that the portfolio should be enough to stand on its own, but the realistic side of this says that there are some extra factors at play. If you are communicating with someone through Twitter or Instagram, let's say that you have like 2 followers on there, but you still have a lovely portfolio. Compare that to if you had like 20,000 followers. Which of these do you think is going to garner a more likely reaction from the person you're trying to communicate with? Now, this is something that I know doesn't feel fair because we'd like to believe that people with small followings but with a great body of work should be as well received as people with the same body of work with large followings. It should just be about the work. But that's not the world we live in, unfortunately. So let's rewind this a bit. Pros of university contacts. You may have direct routes into work experience and apprenticeship placements. You may have people that did work in the industry that decided that, they wanted to teach instead. Those are particularly valuable people. That's a good idea. Negatives, there may be a downside to that where you encounter people that are failures, for in quotes. Again, that's a bit of a rough term, but aren't necessarily doing the teaching for the best reasons, not because they want to, but because they have to. And the secondary negative to that is that there are better methods for communicating with people in the industry nowadays because the world is changing. But the massive caveat to that last one is that context matters. And what university provides you with is a valuable context. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do both, because why not pay for university, go there, make use of the contacts, and also make use of online contacts? So why not maximize both avenues? These are just things to think about. Okay, what about personal work? I think this is quite an important one. I think when you're presenting yourself as a potential recruit or an employee, there are several things to think about. It's not just important to present the fact that you're good at fitting into certain pipelines and workflows, so you can basically enter a job and just get working your way seamlessly. But I think it's also important to demonstrate that you have a very independently powered motivation and ambition. And I think nothing demonstrates this better than a body of personal work that you were not forced to do from a university course, but something that you have for yourself. Maybe for demonstration, you've been working on your own fictional world, and over time you've developed a wide variety of very high quality artwork for this world. Even better would be if this work is directly related to the kinds of pipelines you're trying to apply to. But then not only would you have the work you were made to do in the professional context of a university course, but you would also have this more personal body of work. One of these things brings the professional value, and one of these things builds the character charm, should we say. It's a hook that allows you to learn more about someone's personality without having a direct conversation with them. If someone only has just a body of work that they've been forced to do through an institution, they might as well be a drone. They might as well just be a factory output. And sure, maybe there are some large companies that are looking for that kind of person. But if you want to stand out, I feel like you do need something that helps to demonstrate your personality in the work. Even better is if you manage to achieve all of these things and build up a large following in the process. So maybe even while you're working on the university work on your own personal things on the side if you can find the time. That's a real challenge. And then share these things on social media, which you can then use to help build you up a following. So you're not wasting time. You're making use of the benefits of the context from the university, and you're building yourself up a personal following, which can also help you with alternative life paths if you wanted to go down that route. Now, of course, it should be said that the kind of conversation we've been having so far is more about creative fields in university, creative and creative technical fields. This is where it's super subjective, because these fields are changing at such a rapid pace that the kind of information you learn in university over the course of a few years may be outdated as soon as you leave. Every piece of information that you learn in uni about how to do the stuff can be learned online. Again, might be something that parents and people that aren't particularly familiar with these areas might not like to hear, but you can get more information from YouTube than you can for an entire university course. Learning how to use softwares, learning how the pipelines and the workflows work is no longer restricted behind these big paywalls for institutes. It's available to everyone. It's freely available online. But then, of course, we encounter the fact that, paid courses and content has a particularly higher value than free content online, which, yes, that's true. But if you have the kind of ambition, and if you have the right mindset for being able to extract information from many different places and piece it together into a coherent narrative, then you can be ridiculously efficient at self-teaching yourself new skills just by using online content. And that's what a lot of people in the Blender community have been doing. So then we have the question, okay, is university worth the price tag? And of course, this depends where you're from in the world, because in some countries, university is free, in others it's paid. Just to give you a flat answer, no, it's not worth the price. Now, of course, for the people that have invested so much time and effort into going to uni, having to deal with all the debts and paying it all off, they might feel a bit of buyer's remorse and maybe try and argue the alternative that, yes, it was worth the monetary investment because of all the contacts and all the experience they gained. Well, let's just get this straight. In an ideal world, you wouldn't have to pay for education. So when thinking about the educational content alone for the price, university is not worth it. You can find the information elsewhere. For the contacts, and more importantly, the context that comes with university for the contacts, is it really worth the thousands and thousands of dollars just to get that? I'm not too sure. For the final end result, the degree, a little line on a piece of paper for your CV or your resume, is it worth that? Now that's open to so much debate, because it really depends who's reading that CV when you go to apply for jobs. So the end result, applying to small versus large companies. This is again where it gets extremely subjective, as has been the entire contents of this video. I'm tempted to say no one cares about your degree, but it's not entirely true. What degrees demonstrate to companies is that you are familiar with pipelines and workflows and you can fit into a workplace pretty seamlessly. That's what it demonstrates. If you had two candidates that were otherwise identical, maybe the one without a degree has a slightly better portfolio, and the one with a slightly worse portfolio has the degree, a company might look at that and think, okay, well, we need to spend less time training this person with a degree, so even though their work is slightly worse, we're going to go with them instead. Just think a bit more cynically about this stuff. Everything revolves around money and time investment. If we need to train someone, that's going to cost money, that's going to cost time. And also, it's just going to cost conversational effort trying to figure out, okay, what do you know? Have you used this kind of software? Are you familiar with this kind of pipeline? Blah, 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 blah. Extra time that's not really required. We can't be bothered. We're being honest. We can't be bothered to care about your individuality. So we've seen you've done this degree. We're just going to go for you instead. Now, I think that situation more generally applies to larger companies that are used to bringing people in and out. Again, massive caveats again. I can hear all the comments now that are talking about all the different experiences they've had. That's fine. I think generally for smaller companies instead, that are more comprised of generalists because it requires fewer people to do more tasks, I don't think they care necessarily about whether you're familiar with very specific pipelines. I feel like, from what I've seen, if you have demonstrated an excellent personal portfolio, a wide range of adaptability, and you don't have a degree, you may have better success applying for smaller companies, more startup styles. Because I think for those businesses that are still trying to get their feet off the ground, I don't think they necessarily care too much about whether you've got a little line on a piece of paper. What they want to see are results, things that will help them get off the ground. Do you have a personality that will contribute something to this company? Do you have a value on a personal level? Do you have the adaptability to adapt to different kinds of risks? And if everything about your presentation says yes, then I think they're definitely going to go for you instead of someone that has a degree. On a personal level, I was originally going to go to university. I was going to go in for game development, and I decided just before it started that it wasn't for me. I wanted to take some time off. I knew that I was so emotionally drained out from having been in school for so many years that I just needed some time to connect with the world. I needed a year off. And that year off turned into my life now. This is now a full-time job making stuff for YouTube, making resources for people. This would not have happened if I had gone to university. I'm pretty confident about that. We live in a society. Society likes to cram kids from the age of 4 or 5 into educational institutions, likes to tell them exactly what they can or can't do, when they can or can't use the loo, what's right, what's wrong, and to be afraid of failure from that early age, and keeps them contained in there until they pass through adolescence, and then they reach a point where they need to make a decision for their entire future right there and then. Do they need to go to uni or not? They haven't had a single moment to stop and explore the world or figure out exactly how they fit inside of it. How do we expect people to make those decisions there and then? And how can parents expect their kids to make those decisions? Keeping in mind as well that these institutes are based on outdated information. They don't adapt with the world. Structurally speaking, schools nowadays aren't that different from schools back in the 1900s. They typically don't educate you about the changing world, and they don't prepare you for it. I don't think it's right that schools and parents are forcing kids into these narrow pathways saying, oh yeah, that's just the way that it needs to be. That's the only way you can go forward in life. It's not realistic. Take it from someone that's managed to make it work. There are alternative pathways you can take through life, but it does require an appreciation for failure. The only reason I am now able to make a living and now pay taxes on passive income, so basically I'm making money while I sleep, is because my parents gave me the time to figure out what I wanted to do. If my parents didn't give me that time, I would be in probably a bit of a rubbish regular 9-to-5 job with no prospects of moving up anywhere particularly interesting. Now on a platform like YouTube and selling resources on my websites, I know that I have the potential that things can grow at an exponential pace. It might be unrealistic, but I could wake up tomorrow and be a millionaire. That's a possibility if luck strikes right, which probably won't happen, but it's still a possibility. That possibility does not exist for people that stick strictly to these narrow, contained, prison-like contexts for getting into work and putting themselves in positions where they have no realistic prospects for going up in careers. And also considering that the world is changing at such a fast pace and software is changing, they might spend all this time and all this money getting into very specific roles, which become redundant next year. With the growth of machine learning and artificial intelligence, it seems like, to be honest, and this might annoy some people, a pretty stupid idea to put all your eggs into one basket and become one specific role. If you don't have any consideration for adapting to different types of skills, or even considering alternative pathways through life, then how do you expect to adapt with the times? What are you going to do when your job becomes redundant? Are you just going to hope that nepotism keeps you in the same kind of pathway, the same kind of industry? That's a bit unrealistic, and we've seen time after time people just get thrown away by different publishing companies, especially in the gaming industry, when they're no longer required. But does all that time investment, all that money spent, all that goodwill mean when you're just thrown to the side? The future relies on individuals building things for themselves, not institutions telling them what they should or shouldn't do. If I can give any advice for parents especially, if you have children that you want to go to university but maybe they don't know exactly what they want to do, please, for the love of any deity you choose, give them time. Give them some time away from the lifestyle that they've been conditioned to for years. Maybe let them see the world. Let them know what it feels like to have no responsibilities just for a short amount of time. Because that's something interesting about human nature that I think people aren't really familiar with. That's something that I wanted to experience when I came out of school. I remember thinking to myself, okay, what does it feel like to have nothing to do? No homework, no one to tell you what to do. What does it feel like just to be free? And for some reason, parents and teachers and bosses are afraid of people figuring out what this feels like. Like, once they reach it, they'll never be able to come back. But that's not realistic. I'm lucky in the fact that I now get to experience what that feels like. And I don't want to sound whatever weird, but now that I'm making enough that I can, again, it sounds stupid, play video games all day, go wherever I like, eat whatever I like and whatever, and I have no boss to work for, it gets boring. I remember speaking to other members of the Blendedness community recently and trying to describe it. It's like, the world is now accessible to you. You have no responsibilities to stick to other than your own work that you're self-imposing on yourself with your own soft deadlines. The world has now become both extremely interesting and remarkably boring at the same time. If you can go anywhere you like, why would you? This revelation is something that I think everyone in the modern day needs to try and experience for themselves at least once. Because when they reach a point of zero responsibility, I think a lot of people actually realize that they need some responsibility to keep themselves satisfied. Once people reach that revelation, I feel like it's a lot easier for them to finally make a decision for what they want to do in life. That's something that I think parents and teachers should be encouraging people to find. That revelation, I need responsibility to feel satisfied. But what we're actually doing now is we're just funneling kids into these institutions and somehow making them feel like that revelation is something that should never be obtained, that if you get there, you'll just be a lazy bum for your entire life. That's not what human nature is like. But I think instead, if we just encouraged people to get to that point and we were more relaxed about it, and we gave people options and told them that they could do anything they wanted, and made them feel like they didn't always have something to hand into someone, they didn't always have someone to please, then they would be in a better position mentally, maybe a few years after going or coming out of school, to finally make a decision for what direction they want to take in life. I consider myself lucky and privileged because my parents had the foresight to understand that, and I think a lot of that comes from my family being a very self-employed family. My dad went through a bit of a similar path when he was growing up, so he understood that process. And my mum as well has just been such a hugely significant factor in the emotional stability of this entire journey. So rolling this all back, what do you say to someone who asks you, should I go to university? It's not a very simple question. Because it directly ties into your entire future as a human being. You're a living, breathing, sentient being in, well, a seemingly endless universe. You know, we might even be on the cusp of disclosing alien life. I mean, come on, parents, kids, get some perspective. Is taking a few years off just to figure out what you want from life really such a bad deal? I think everyone should just relax a bit, you know, be a bit more considerate. I've been speaking to a lot of friends from around the world recently, and they've been educating me about the different cultures and responses there are to, you know, the education system and what you need to do in life to even be at a base level to succeed. And a lot of it just sounds very unhealthy. But maybe this rambling has helped some people. Maybe it's annoyed some people. I expect it has annoyed some people because it's YouTube. I'm expecting to get maybe a few hate comments. But if you did hate the video, then make sure to leave a comment because the engagement helps with the algorithm. So thank you very much. And if you found it useful, then feel free to let me know. Share your experience as well. Like, let me know if you've been to university, whether it was good for you or whether you regretted it, the kinds of things that you might have only gotten by going to university or by avoiding it, like me. I think the more perspectives there are, the better this conversation will be. So just share everything you can in the description and be open to questions from other people as well, in case they want to come and pry your experience for more knowledge. So thanks for watching, everyone. Maybe check out my website or subscribe or, you know, all the other stuff. Have a great day, make sure to get vaccinated, and I will see you next time.